This is a sensor that breaks down the wall of the usual. China, which once boasted the world's largest population, has now lost that spot to India and become the second largest in the world. It is now becoming one of the countries with the fastest declining population worldwide. In 2023, the population decreased by 2.08 million, making it the country with the highest population decline globally. This raises a question. Why has a populous country like China faced this situation? China, once known for its high birth rates, now faces a shocking reality. A fertility rate below 1. Let's uncover the startling reasons behind this dramatic shift. Before we start, 70% of you watching aren't subscribed. I'd be grateful if you could hit subscribe just once. I'm asking sincerely. Experts warn that China's population decline puts the country in a more dire situation than Korea. From 1905 to the 1960s, China's birth rate was an enormous 6 to 7 children per woman. China's peak birth rate was in 1963 at around 7 children per woman. That was the highest number of births ever, with 29.593 million babies born in a single year. And with 25 to 30 million newborns every year, it became the center of global population growth. At that time, China had extremely high birth rates and was not a super-aged society. With the population increasing so much, the growth rate became so fast that China could hardly handle it alone. In 1972, China started enforcing birth control measures to limit population growth, leading to a sharp decline in birth rates. In 1970, the birth rate was in the 5s, but by the late 1970s, it had dropped to the 2s. Since 1997, the number of births surpassed 20 million, and from 1998 onwards, it has remained in the 10 million range. The issue arises as the Chinese generation that experienced the high birth rate is now entering old age. Every year, 20 to 30 million people are becoming elderly all at once. However, due to strict birth control policies, the numbers couldn't rebound and kept declining. Now, only about 9 million babies are born each year, and in 2023, the number was 9.02 million, showing a sharp decline in the birth rate. This was the lowest level since record-keeping began in 1949. Currently, the United Nations reports that China's academic fertility rate is about 0.9999 or 1 child per woman, and the academic fertility rate continues to decline. In fact, the Chinese government isn't foolish, so when the birth rate started to drop, they did take some action. However, the general consensus is that it was too late. From 2001 to 2010, an average of about 16.13 million children were born each year, but the birth rate was continuously declining during that period. The birth restrictions were officially abolished in 2013, but it was already too late by the time they tried to do so. China implemented the two-child policy in 2013, allowing some couples to have a second child. In 2015, they introduced a universal two-child policy. In 2021, they started the three-child policy. However, these policies were ineffective. Consequently, China has begun to experience population decline, with the impact being greater than anticipated. In 2023, China recorded 9.02 million births and 11.1 million deaths. In 2022, China's death rate reached 7.87%, the highest since 1969. 8.06% during the tumultuous Cultural Revolution. Right now, China is in shock over the population decrease of 2.08 million people. They say that China is facing a population crisis not seen in 1,000 years. Moreover, the World Population Outlook projected the total population could be 767 million by 2100, and in a grimmer scenario, it might plummet to 390 million. If China fails to address this issue, its population could potentially drop by over a billion before the end of the 21st century. They are also paying the price for shifting too rapidly from high birth rates to ultra-low birth rates. The reasons why Chinese people are not having children are complex, and in fact, they're not much different from those in Korea. High education and childcare costs are also problematic. Even with both parents working, the high cost of living makes it challenging to provide a good environment for their children. Firstly, marriages are declining in China. In 2021, 11.57 million people tied the knot for the first time. In 2013, it was 23.85 million, so it has significantly decreased. The continent's scale is truly enormous. As a result, the impact of population decline is being felt in various places. In 2022, China had 274,400 kindergartens nationwide, as per the Ministry of Education. Kindergarten enrollment fell by over 5.3 million, while the total number decreased by 14,800 compared to 2021. Kindergartens struggling to enroll students are boosting promotions with free parent-child events and lowering admission age to 1 to 2 years old. However, the birth rate remains low, showing no signs of improvement. The key issue is the anticipated decline in China's working population, which has been a significant driver of its past economic growth. Low-wage labor has bolstered the manufacturing industry's competitiveness and fueled China's economic growth. As the labor supply decreases, we face a new reality. The labor shortage will cause wages to rise and companies to face higher costs. In the end, the Chinese economy is likely to hit the wall of slowing growth. Japan's population started declining in 2011 and Korea's in 2020. However, their economic growth rates haven't dropped sharply, suggesting China may follow a similar trajectory. Given China's significantly larger population decline compared to Korea and Japan, China may face even more severe consequences than those experienced by Korea and Japan. The shrinking workforce is expected to cause a decline in overall economic activity. For example, a slowdown in consumption is a typical case. When the younger generation decreases, the consumer base also shrinks accordingly. Consequently, the economy's vitality will decline, along with reduced investment in housing and infrastructure. With slower population growth, the demand for new housing and road construction will naturally decrease. The primary growth engines that have bolstered China's economy are at risk of vanishing. Currently, infrastructure is a key industry in China, so reduced investment could be devastating. Above all, the biggest burden seems to come from aging. In countries like Korea or Japan, the wealth gap isn't as big as you might think, at least compared to China, but in China, the wealth gap is enormous. But imagine if the elderly population grows by 20 million annually, that's not ignorable. As the population ages, the cost of supporting the elderly will rise sharply due to increased medical expenses and pension spending. Consequently, China's financial burden is projected to increase, adding to the government's existing struggles with local debt. Adding the burden of supporting the elderly and medical expenses will worsen the situation further. Consequently, the government's fiscal capacity will diminish, potentially leading to an economic crisis. In the end, China has to solve its economic challenges amid the two threats of population decline and aging. Innovative economic policies and boosting the silver economy could help, but ultimately, tackling population decline should be the main focus. China's situation is more severe than Korea's. Although Korea's low birth rate is a serious problem, the scale of China's population amplifies the impact of its declining birth rate. Above all, the biggest problem in China is that the decline in birth rate is happening at a lower economic level compared to other countries. China's newborn population started visibly decreasing from 2017 onwards. But at that time, China's per capita gross domestic product was $8,816. In 1997, Korea's fertility rate was 1.54 when its per capita gross domestic product was about $13,000. Japan's fertility rate dropped to 1.5 in 1992 when its per capita gross domestic product reached $31,414. In 2019, China's school fertility rate was 1.5 and its per capita gross domestic product was $10,143. Considering inflation and the decline of the yuan against the dollar, the drop in China's fertility rate happened at a much lower economic level than in Korea or Japan. Advanced nations like Korea or Japan can still manage even with declining populations. If China, amidst rapid growth, faces population decline and aging, it will take much longer to find and nurture new growth engines, making escaping the middle-income trap impossible. It's practically impossible. In the end, this issue of population decline means that China will never be able to catch up with the United States. That's why many people say things like this. People now refer to China as peak China. China has reached its peak, and if the current trend continues, the gap with the United States will widen. Some suggest that China should pursue its objectives now while at its zenith. That's the invasion of Taiwan. Even from China's perspective, the future looks very bleak. The population keeps declining, and the Western countries keep putting pressure on them. Because of this, there's talk that China might intentionally start a war to occupy Taiwan and try to turn things around. Personally, I hope it doesn't go that far. I want you to know that China is facing a major crisis due to its current population decline. What choices will China, once a country with a huge population, make in the face of this massive decline? What choices have you made in your own life? Please let me know in the comments. That's all for this video. Bye!